the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, has filed what he termed as fresh evidence against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the Supreme Court. The former vice president, who has also urged Supreme Court to accept the new evidence, specifically sought to leave of the Apex Court to tender Tinubu's academic records, which he said were handed over to him by the Chicago State University on October 2nd, 2023. In a motion he filed through his team of lawyers, led by Chief Chris Uche, SAN, the PDP presidential candidate said the evidence he is seeking to tender before the court would establish his allegations that Tinubu submitted forged documents to the Independent National Electoral Commission in aid of his qualification to participate in the presidential election. Atiku argued that Tinubu, by his action, committed forgery and perjury and therefore deserved to be removed from office by the Supreme Court. He also stated that the 32-page document he is seeking to tender was released by the CSU on the orders of Judge Nancy Maldonado of the District Court of Illinois, Eastern Division, Illinois, in the United States of America. All right. Steve, the saga continues.
The saga continues.
If you recall, I mean, the whole idea was, discovery for use. And we don't know if the Supreme Court will admit this fresh evidence at this point.
Yeah.
Some lawyers have argued that it is in the best interest of the Supreme Court to accept this because it's a matter of national importance, national interest. Others have said it's not technical for them to admit these documents in court.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's up to the Supreme Court, frankly speaking, and we will get to know in a matter of days or weeks, when the justices will decide, whether it's acceptable to them or not. I think that the lawyers to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has done the right thing to their cause, which is to present that which they believe they got from Chicago State University, and which they think that it might swing the judgment in their favor. And part of what they're arguing is that it has been done before, and they cited instances that for electoral petition, if it becomes necessary, and that the Supreme Court can and indeed have done that before to accept fresh evidence that can help or assist the petitioner. Of course, part of what people are saying is that you didn't plead some of these things ab initio,
right.
And that the Supreme Court is not where you go and argue fresh cases. But then, even if Supreme Court accepts, it's also all about what's the precedent. People have cited the case of two governors in Osun,
yes,
and in Enugu, where some decisions have been taken and it didn't quite go in the manner that a lot of people thought that it would go. So it is not just about will the Supreme Court accept, even if they do, what is the strength of the evidence that Atiku Abubakar and his lawyers are bringing to the court. But of course, we know that this will not go away anytime soon. It is not likely that it will even disappear after the Supreme Court ruling. There are other things attached to the evidence in court that Atiku Abubakar is bringing, and I foresee that this might stretch ultimately, depending on what the Supreme Court says, ultimately towards 2026, if not to 2027, when the next round of the elections and voting, will happen. Absolutely. But let's see, it's interesting times, isn't it?
Let's see.
Sadly, our country is not getting the best in terms of reputation, out of all this. And I hope that there won't be damages to people, to Nigerians, especially those who are seeking legitimate opportunities abroad, right, in terms of having to go through their documents and credentials and the things that they have pleaded.
Yes, you cited some examples, and I appreciate that you were able to do. But just for some clarity on some of those examples, there was one in 2020, which is the case of David Leon of the APC.
Yeah.
In that case, they talked about bearing different names in different certificates. They said that, he committed, fraud, and forgery of certificate is a crime. So these are some of the arguments that will be made in court if they admit those documents. If they admit and you're able to prove that forgery, indeed occurred. Well, all right.
All right, moving on. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has called on states and local government authorities to evaluate their situation and take adequate precautions following the rapid release of water from Lagdo Dam and the flooding of communities along the banks of River Benue. Director General of NEMA, Mustafa Habib, said the agency has been alerted on the increased displacement of communities and farmlands along the bank of River Niger in Adamawa, Taraba, and Benue states. The agency says affected areas must be on guard to avoid displacement of communities and crops.
The update from NEMA is that the agency has been alerted on the sudden increase inundation of riparian communities and farmlands along the banks of River Niger in Adamawa, Taraba, and Benue states in the past 48 hours. The sudden situation is attributed to the rapid release of waters from Lagdo Dam in the Republic of Cameroon and has resulted in the displacement of several inhabitants of the affected communities. Furthermore, croplands and vulnerable infrastructure are at risk of getting washed away by floodwaters. Situation reports from Adamawa State confirms the upsurge of floodwaters along the floodplains of River Benue. The situation is expected to be replicated in downstream states of Taraba, Benue, Nasarawa, Kogi, Anambra, Edo, Delta, and Bayelsa states, as of the River Benue joins River Niger and flows to the Atlantic Ocean through the Niger Delta.
All right, Steve.
All right.
I mean, I think this is such an important call. If you recall, we always talk about preparation before the flooding. It's important that NEMA is calling, for these states to prepare because of the opening of the Cameroon Lagdo Dam, which has been quite controversial, hasn't it, Steve?
It has been.
Yes.
I mean, for a while now, anytime that the dam, is open, we know that the consequences that we will suffer, especially for the three states that NEMA mentioned, Adamawa, Taraba, and up to Benue, I believe. So what they have done is quite in order. Is the proper thing to do, as you will find in any serious country when there are things that you may not have total control over, especially when it is nature. So NEMA is one, and they are taking it beyond those three states to say that yes, the Lagdo Dam might be an issue, but generally too, in terms of flooding, given the season that we are in, there are many states, up to 16 states in the Federation, that will need to be careful. So I hope that each state will have their own sort of rescue teams, ready teams, that, if evacuation will be necessary, for example. I like the fact that Lagos State has been, making that call lately, and we see what the gentleman in the Environment Ministry, Atiku, for example, is doing, going from point A to B, covering all areas just to ensure that man-made errors do not add to the things that you encounter when nature decides to kind of go haywire. So this is the season. We have been warned, and people too will have to conform and ensure that their environment, is in order.
Absolutely. Well said, Steve. Well, mental health experts have called for the decriminalization of suicide attempt as an offense in Nigeria. This was at the Mental Health Symposium organized in Abuja. Arise correspondent Mary Chinda reports.
A graphic case of a suicide attempt last week in Lagos, Nigeria. The newspaper headlines have been replete with successful suicide cases. And just when you think you have seen it all, another suicide attempt on display this week in the nation's commercial capital, Lagos. Every 30 seconds, at least one person dies by suicide. Now, that is why experts here have gathered to chart a course for the inclusion of mental health in the primary health care at both local government and national levels.
We as a people, we have not normalized seeking help. It's not part of our culture, and we tend to think that, okay, it's only those that are mad that have to be tied up and kept somewhere that have mental health issues.
We need to educate ourselves. The fact that somebody does not look like you, talk like you, have some of the resources you have, does not make them less of you.
The consensus here is that an attempt by a person to end his life is born out of deep-seated pain and frustration and should require collective social support. But Nigeria's criminal codes, Section 327, still classifies suicide as a criminal offense punishable by a jail sentence. Lead coach of Mental Health with DT, a non-governmental organization. This lawmaker and experts insist this criminal code must be reviewed.
So in Nigeria, attempted suicide is a crime. So if you try to kill yourself in Nigeria, you're going to be jailed for 1 year. One of the things we are driving is to decriminalize suicide, attempted suicide in Nigeria. Anyone that tries to kill themselves needs help. So let us give them help and not put them behind bars, because that will cause more problem for them.
We had a motion on the floor, right, which is to compel the federal government to ensure the full compliance, with the provisions of the mental health law that was passed in the Buhari administration. So it shows that the House is up and alive to these issues to ensure that we make a difference in destigmatizing issues around mental health.
They say neglecting mental health awareness will be inimical to the nation. This August, social media personality Farida attempted to jump into the third mainland bridge to end it all. Mary Chinda, Arise News.
I think this is such an important motion that has been put forward. I mean, just that statistics alone is quite alarming. Every 30 seconds, one person dies. I mean, suicide is the leading cause of death in many countries. And in San Diego, I believe I saw something about 48,000 people died last year or 2 years ago. I mean, via suicide. And to think that in Nigeria, it's a criminal offense. I mean, there are a lot of things that we have to deal with. I believe also you said in some states in the United States, it is a criminal offense, but in general,
decriminalized in many parts of the world.
In many parts of the world. It should be decriminalized because depression is such a big problem a lot of people are facing. Like we saw in that report, the woman who tried to kill herself. And I told you, we discussed that third mainland bridge issue recently, and I told you that that is the main place people go and jump and kill themselves. Like, I get those videos every day. But only recently we saw this man jumping. I think it was a Falmouth Bridge just across from us here. He wanted to kill himself, but he was saved. But I mean, this is what we need to do. We need to put this motion forward and speak about the issue here. It shouldn't be a criminal offense. It should be a mental situation where people can have to deal with these people that are actually facing depression. If you want to kill yourself, you have depression for sure.
I mean, it's not a fresh attempt, but I like the fact that this organization is bringing it back. It's been on for years. The need to decriminalize the act of suicide. It's not something that you walk into easily, and I think part of what people are struggling with is to accept that depression is real. And what goes with that is to not just to decriminalize, but also to destigmatize. It's the stigmatization that goes with being as they will say here, he has coins, and things like that.
What is coins, really?
That there is a knot that is loose, and somebody said, that kind of a thing.
Correct,
so the sort of language that we use on or about people who are experiencing or suffering from depression or mental health issues, those are the kind of things that we need to deal with. And therefore, when you have people like that, with the struggle, the internal battle that they are having, with the fact that, you know, they are being stigmatized, that many people don't even understand what they are up against. You now say that if you attempt it, it's 1 year in jail, you know, by the Criminal Code 327 of the Criminal Code. I think that this is a good time to talk frankly with government and those in authorities about, you know, moving in tandem with the world. And we can't just continue to deal with this situation. I like the point that you raised about flag points where we know that these things happen a lot. I'm not sure what the best answer would be as to how to deal with it.
For the third mainland bridge, they need to secure it, raise the bar a bit, have more security personnel there to, you know, help these people, you know, not commit suicide. Because, I mean, the ones I receive are the ones I get. What about others that have killed themselves?
Exactly.
I mean,
because the situation is underreported in Nigeria. We may think that it is not a big deal, but it is indeed. It's a big deal.
Absolutely.
You know? So let's hope that the right quarters are listening and will take the right decision.
Right, absolutely. Right, like I said before, they said something about the criminal code there. It's attempted suicide, you'll be jailed for...
It's 1 year.
1 year.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right. That's in section 327 of the criminal code.
That needs to be reviewed. Well, we'll head over now to Israel, where the number of casualties have increased in the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas attack on the country in years, killing scores and wounding hundreds in a surprise assault that combined gunmen crossing into Israel with a barrage of rockets fired from Gaza. Eyewitness video show Israeli troops patrolling the streets of Sderot in 2 different locations. Sderot is just 4 kilometers from Gaza Strip and has been bearing the brunt of previous Palestine shelling attacks. Israel's National Rescue Service says at least 200 people were killed and 1,100 wounded, making it the deadliest attack in Israel in decades. At least 198 people in the Gaza Strip have been killed and at least 1,610 wounded in Israeli strikes, the Palestinian Health Ministry said. Well, the United States President Joe Biden on Saturday decried the appalling assault by Hamas militants, pledging that his administration will ensure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself after the surprise attack that drew worldwide condemnation and anger from Israeli allies. He said terrorism is never justified and Israel has a right to defend itself and its people. He warned any other party hostile to Israel against taking advantage in this situation.
Thousands of rockets in a space of hours raining down on Israeli cities. I got up this morning, started this at 7:30, 8 o'clock, my calls. Hamas terrorists crossing in Israel, killing not only Israeli soldiers, but Israeli civilians. In the street, in their homes, innocent people murdered, wounded, entire families taken hostage by Hamas. Just days after Israel marked the holiest of days in the Jewish calendar. It's unconscionable. You know, when I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning, I told him the United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people, full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering. Let me say this as clearly as I can. This is not a moment for any party hostile to Israel to exploit these attacks to seek advantage. The world is watching. I've also been in contact with the King of Jordan, spoke with members of Congress, directed my national security team to engage with their Israeli counterparts, military to military, intelligence to intelligence, diplomat to diplomat, to make sure Israel has what it needs. I've also directed my team to remain in constant contact with leaders throughout the region, including Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Oman, the UAE, as well as our European partners and the Palestinian Authority.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the state of Israel is at war. At the beginning of the Security Cabinet meeting in Tel Aviv, Israeli officials say Palestinian militants had begun a war against Israel, which they infiltrated by air, sea, and land from the blockaded Gaza Strip, a major escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
This morning, the state of Israel has been at war. Our first objective is to clear out the hostile forces that infiltrated our territory and restore the security and quiet to the communities that have been attacked. The second objective, at the same time, is to exact an immense price from the enemy, within the Gaza Strip as well. The third objective is to reinforce other fronts so that nobody should mistakenly join this war. We are at war. In war, one needs to be level-headed. I call on all citizens of Israel to unite in order to achieve our highest goal, victory in the war. Citizens of Israel. We are at war, not in an operation or in rounds, but at war. This morning, Hamas launched a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel and its citizens. We have been in this since the early morning hours. I convened the heads of the security establishment and ordered, first of all, to clear out the communities that have been infiltrated by terrorists. This currently is being carried out. At the same time, I have ordered an extensive mobilization of reserves and that we return fire of a magnitude that the enemy has not known. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price. In the meantime, I call on the citizens of Israel to strictly adhere to the directives of the IDF and Home Front Command. We are at war and we will win it.
Israeli Prime Minister there, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that we are at war. I mean, they have been at war for decades, would I say. I mean, I think that it is important that he did call that nobody should join this war. I mean, it's a thing of the Western world, especially in the United States, to help out in those types of situations. Like you heard Joe Biden saying that they're going to, try to help, but I don't know what that warning signals at this point.
Well, for me, I mean, this is quite frankly sad, disheartening. Totally,
absolutely,
utterly horrifying.
Absolutely.
And the first thing to do will be, of course, to sympathize with those who have lost their lives. Israel has always been in conflict with, the Palestine for as long as, we can imagine.
Yes.
Even way back into scriptural history. But Benjamin Netanyahu, who seems to like wars, now declaring that Israel is at war, sends a signal that is a bit unsettling. And it shows that this might be a long-drawn battle. Because, of course, Israel will retaliate, and they've promised to do that in a manner that will be devastating. What does devastation connote? Lives will be lost, destructions will be massive, and war will permeate the entire region again, sadly. We know that Iran is more than an onlooker in this manner, in this war. President Biden is saying that, we've spoken to Jordan, we've spoken to Turkey, we've spoken to Saudi Arabia and everything, just to make sure that the entire region does not go up, in flames. But the necessary question to ask will be that why does America continue along the line that doesn't seem to provide the needed peace and solution to the Israeli-Palestine thing? You are saying that Israel deserves to protect itself. Yes, Israel does.
Of course.
The same way that you said that Ukraine deserves to protect and defend itself against Russia. But then are they trying to say that the Palestinians do not deserve to protect themselves?
You just hit the nail on the head there.
Even though, they initiated this, this war, but we know the background and the context, around this. War is not desirable. Peace is preferred. But let's hope in the way that Nigeria, for example, has intervened to say de-escalate, let peace reign.
Yes.
Let us hope that other world leaders in particular, will toe that line.
Absolutely.
And not to encourage that this war will fester. It's a shame, really.
Let peace reign. I mean, those numbers are not just numbers. They are human beings.
Horrifying.
1,600 people died. I mean, 1,000 wounded. These are
we're not just,
beings.
the funny thing is that we're not just watching on television. No. Everybody's following on social media.
Absolutely.
Even the people in the battlefront, are showing the whole world. I mean, that's the sad part, of the times that we are in.
Yeah,
so
sad.
So sad.
Sad.